Hello everyone. In today's video, we are going to explore how conversation flows work in PEGA 8.6. Now, conversation flow is a new feature which allows a very easy way to configure chatbots and their normal processes. So, before we go into conversation flow, we need to set up a use case for the actual process to work. Now, what is the use case I have thought of? Again, it's a very simple use case just to show how the functionality works. The use case is something like this. I would have a generic case type which would capture some information about a service case, service request information. The service request would have some information like name and email. Now, once that case is created, at a later stage, of course, I'm doing it at the same session, but at a later stage, the user can come in and they can use the chatbot to see what exactly is the status of that case. Now, there are two steps to it. The first step is the user first gives the case ID. Now, on that case ID, the system would query. The chatbot will query the system and figure out whether there is a case for it. If a case is not found with that case ID, then the chatbot would escalate the issue to its manager. Now, the manager, again, a chatbot conversation flow, that would now try to get some advanced information. For example, the name and the email, which was given into the service request. Based on that, it will then try to find out the information. And then, if it can find it, it will then show the status of the case. Otherwise, it will give a denial message and complete the conversation flow. So, how do we do it? So, as I mentioned, we need to we need to have two or one or two steps done before the actual chatbot can be configured. First is the one which I mentioned about having a normal case type created, which would allow the user to capture the information. Second would be we need to create a chatbot case type. When the chatbot case type is created, we would then put the entire flow of the chatbot in that case type, and we will see how it works. Okay, let's figure out how to do it. So, as part of the basic setup, I have created a normal case type called generic case, which has information called, which actually captures information called service request. Again, the service request has some information like the requester name and requester email. I have also created a separate chatbot case type, which will allow me to create the chatbot information. I will come to the implementation part a bit later. I would first show you the application, and then we can explore how it has been done. Now, so I would first show you two. I will show you two scenarios. One would be a positive scenario. One would be a negative scenario. To figure out how exactly a conversation flow can be created. Let's create a case first. Let's create a case. I would give some information. I would give a information of my own name and address. Okay, this is something I did for something else, so I will choose a value for a very famous restaurant in Kolkata. So as you can see, now the case has been created. I close it. Okay. Now imagine that the actual user is coming out and trying to search for the status of that case. So how would they do it? They would come here and they will start again. This is the chat from my earlier interactions. I would not give attention to that. So first I will give hey, which actually starts the process. Then asks for the service request number. I will just give the number gen2 which I just created. So as you can see, it shows that your name is Victor Talukdar, which is my name, and it shows the status of the case, which is a positive scenario. Okay. Now let's look at a negative scenario, for example. So what I would do is I would use, let's say, I would again start the flow with saying hey, and again it asks for a service request number. Now this time I will give a number which does not exist. Let's say Gen44 does not exist. So it will then show, okay, we cannot understand your question. I will route you to my manager, which of course is a higher, let's say a higher manager chatbot. Now it actually now asks you for your name. So let me see if I can just give a name, and let's say like this. So as you can see, it shows that since this email address does not exist, it says this conversation can serve no purpose anymore, goodbye, which effectively means that it cannot find the case which I'm actually looking for with the combination of the name and the email. So of course I have a case which I could find with the normal case ID, and I can also search with the same information from the manager escalation chatbot using my name and email. But yeah, I've currently shown you how the negative scenario would work. Chatbot works in PEGA 8.6. Now, if you have worked on chatbots before until PEGA 8.5 version, you needed to create a flow where you would actually have shapes called questions. Add a question, and then of course inside the shape you would need to add rules called questions, which would then have a paragraph inside it, which will then allow you to ask a question and then capture the response for it. Now in PEGA 8.6, PEGA has drastically simplified the overall process so that you can scale up a very simple conversation flow very fast without creating too many rules. Now how have they done it? Let's try to explore that. Now this is the case designer for the generic chatbot case type which I've created. So if I open the process, you will see that instead of using any other shape which we normally use for inside processes, I've used something called a conversation flow. This one. Now inside the conversation flow is the main functionality of the entire chatbot hidden or encapsulated. So if I open the flow, you will see that this actually has in general two types of shapes. So the first shape, which is this yellow one, is actually called send a message. This one, conversation send a message. Now when do you use the send a message? This shape is used for scenarios where you want to send a message to the chatbot without really expecting an answer. So for example, if you're giving a welcome message, or let's say you're trying to make a conclusion message saying that I could not find your message, or let's say have we have now found your information, so hope that helps you out, or something like that, which does not expect a response back from the user, then you use a send a message shape. Okay, so whenever you use this, you can then view the properties, and you can see that you can use you can either give an inline message right like this, or you can select an existing paragraph rule, which would of course have the information. Now of course using a paragraph will allow you to localize the information properly as well based on users language. This is first step. Second, of course, the second shape which we're talking about here is the ask a question method. The ask a question smart shape. Now this one has a question type here first as a first option. Now the open end, so the question type can be either open-ended buttons or quick replies or yes or no. Others I think are readily straightforward. But if you think about the most important types, they are open-ended. Now here of course you can give a value, or you can use a paragraph rule, the same way as you can do it for a send a message type. You can let's not do that at the moment. And you can also, now after you have given the value, then you can save the response which has been given to the user to a specific value or to a specific attribute inside the case type. Now once you save it, you can also choose to extract certain entities out from the response if you want to. That is another option. And you can also use let's say a number of repeats option, which actually uses smart validation. So how does smart validation work? So for example, suppose you're asking the user for a date field, let's say birth date. Okay. Now if the user gives some other value types, let's say the user gives a telephone number, so then it will automatically use the smart validation to ask for a proper response. Now you can choose to have the number of repeats until successful. So for example, if the user keeps on giving a wrong answer, you can keep on prompting the user to give a correct answer, or you can bound the number. So like, or you can bind the number. So you can either say one or two or three times max, until which you will allow the chatbot to repeat it. Okay. After that, of course, the flow would try to give a validation error message, which you can see here, and then it will proceed. Now again, after this, of course, the good thing about a conversation flow is you can add these shapes, which are of course given here, and but you can also add some automations. For example, run data transform. If you want to, you can add a utility, you can add a decision, and you can also add a normal question. If for example, you already have existing questions already created, so you can also do that, or you can send out an email if you want to. So these are the normal steps inside a normal flow. So if you forget about what can be done, and if you look at the normal flow, what I've done here, first I've actually asked the user for a normal message, and then asked for a service request number. Now when the user has said that my service request number is this, I have used something called a utility activity called search generic case, which I've used. Now that actually tries to find out the case. Now if you find out the case, it will then automatically route to this message, where it tries to say that, you know what, I have found you, and of course I've used a paragraph here, so you can see the information here. Or what you can do is, if you see that the information has not been found, then you can use a when rule, and you can go to the negative step, and you can move to the escalation module. Again, here I've used a px change stage utility, which allows you to route to any other stage. Now of course this stage is not something you would need in the normal flow, because of course if your actual flow works, then you will not need a manager escalation. So this would be an alternate stage. So if I go back to the generate chatbot, you will see that I have created an alternate stage called escalation, and I've added the manager escalation, which is almost similar. The only difference is this one also has a like a name and email combination which will be asked, and then of course I will use this utility to search, or let's say obj browse on that case type, the normal generic case type, with the name and the email, and we will figure out whether I can find the person, yes or no. That kind of completes what we tried to learn from the conversation flow. The one really interesting thing I learned while doing it is something which I had not seen before in PEGA. I'm not sure whether this is a new feature in PEGA 8.6, but this is something I will share with you also. This is something which I learned while doing this generic chatbot case type data modeling. Now, normally what happens, if you go back to, let's say, 1 or 2 years back. Now suppose I tell you that, you know what, I have a case type A, and I want to access another case of case type B from inside case type A. Okay. Now what we normally do is, we either can do an obj open or an obj browse with a case ID which is being captured from the screen, and then we can use that to open the existing case of another case type. One option. Second option, which I have seen less but can also be done, is you can use something called a linked property. Now linked property is something you can use, and you can actually link the two classes together, and you can use it to fetch another record of case type B, which effectively is the other case type here. You can also get the record for that. Now there's another new method of doing it in PEGA 8.6. I'm not sure whether this is specific to PEGA 8.6, but I will show you anyway. There is, suppose you want to create a new type, you can also choose something called a case reference. Okay, this option. Now whenever you select case reference, what it does is you can look at this type. This I have created. Now if you open the existing property which I have created, it automatically creates one more data page called d underscore generic case. So what then happens is, whenever you are actually having a page like this, if you set a property called, let's say, dot generic case info dot pyd, which I have done, I will show you that. I have a utility somewhere which I have used. So as you can see, I have simply set the value called dot generic case info dot pyd. So whenever I'm setting this property from the service request number which I'm capturing from the chatbot, now whenever I'm doing this, it will automatically pull the record of that case ID, and it will store it on this generic case info information. It's a very interesting way, and it's also a good way to do it. There is of course one problem which I found while using it, is that whenever you, if you for example pass a value which is not correct, it will then automatically add a message on that page. So that kind of like would probably not function the way you want. So I have given a page clear message for the moment to bypass that. But there is something which I need to explore a bit more to find out what other steps we can do. So that is effectively it, which I learned, and I hope you will learn a bit more as well. If you have any questions about conversation flow, you can of course reach out to me. I'm no expert on this, but if I can answer it, I will definitely will. Thank you.